protecting our citizens are vital interests to the Liberal Party, and we plan on ensuring that our military is somewhat underfunded equipment-wise, and we have planned to introduce new equipment and to acquire new equipment, as well as possibly investing to be able to produce our own equipment ourselves instead of buying foreign one to improve the economy. But at the end of the day, what's important is our citizens. I have, in the last term, reinstated the Inspector General and created the CBSA Review Act. I am a proponent for keeping oversight on our intelligence things to ensure that they do not encroach on the rights and the privacies of our citizens. And so this is integral to keeping our citizens safe, to keeping Canada safe. And so, yeah, thank you.
So as the member for the Liberals and the Conservatives said, keeping Canadians safe is obviously a top priority. I think this is probably true for every party. Like, we all care about Canadians. We want to protect them. We have a lot of ideas for protecting Canadians. Obviously, one of the biggest threats as ISIS continues to lose ground, they have switched more to conventional terror tactics, like launching attacks against Canada and other Western nations at home, like in Canada, rather than launching attacks in the Middle East to try and capture territory. I think that by continuing our mission there, as I've said we plan to do, we can help combat this threat. We also want to fight against homegrown terrorism. We want to try and find these any places that are encouraging homegrown terrorism, be they churches or mosques or synagogues. Once we find these places, we want to make sure that they're closed down, that they're not going to be spewing this dangerous ideology and these ideas. We want to close them. We also believe in helping our police. We know our police forces are they're good at their job, but they need help. They need funding. So we want to make sure that they have the adequate funding to help do their job and help protect Canadians.
So I think we can all agree that keeping Canadians safe is our number one top priority. The question really comes down to how we're going to do that. Things like means versus ends. One of the key aspects that we're pushing for is to basically end the use of torture, which is not only completely uncalled for, but just doesn't work. People will say anything under that kind of duress, whether it's useful or not, most often not. The key aspect of what we need to do is de-radicalization. We need to get these people who are being radicalized out of that situation. Now, there is this impression that people are coming in from outside, talking to quote-unquote our Muslims, and radicalizing them. Well, you can call me a foolish optimist, but I'd like to believe that the opposite can happen. That Canadians who are moderate can moderate people from other countries. Now, I know there is this view that the mods, or moderates, mods, if you will, that there is this view, excuse my language, of cuck the mods, that, maybe they're not necessarily working as hard as they possibly could, so on and so forth. But I really think what we are seeing is that these connections with people here, from people away, and other Canadians here who could potentially be radicalized, is just that radicalization isn't happening at the same rate as it is in other countries. I believe part of the reason is our strong Canadian values. It comes down to the right approach. Are we going to be punitive or not? Now, when we talk about defeating ISIS, well, the question is, well, how do we defeat ISIS? Well, some might say, oh, it's common sense. You go in there with guns blazing. But we did that with Saddam Hussein, and ISIS rose up. So we really need to look at how we're doing things and what the actual consequences of these actions are, because this punitive approach just is not working. And that's why we do not support the continuing of these bombing runs against citizens in the Middle East.
Teddy, not to go at you too much, but let me just make this clear. You don't believe that our stance against the Islamic State, a group which has decapitated journalists, a group which has infringed on every basic, decent standard of humanity, you don't think our strategy against this heinous, morally repugnant organization should be punitive?
I don't believe our strategy should be something that helps them in the long run, no.
You just said that you don't think it should be punitive. Do you still stand by those words? You don't think that we should utilize punitive tactics, i.e., punishing the individuals who are actually on the battlefield, who are doing this slurring the name of Islam, and who are killing everyday people, mostly Muslims, as a matter of fact? You think that we should not take punitive, punishing actions towards these individuals?
Well, what I'm hearing is basically you want to go in with all guns blazing, and every time you do that, you create a new ISIS. So no, I do not agree with that.
Punitive can take many aspects, but I'm focusing on the word that you've used, and, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe this is simply pedantic, but was your usage of the word punitive in relation to the death cult of the Islamic State, Daesh, was that something that came naturally, or did you purposefully use the word punitive with the intent that your party's policy would be taking a stance against the Islamic State that is not punitive, using the word punitive?
Well, I think there has been a slight misunderstanding, but that misunderstanding isn't the word. I think the misunderstanding comes with the public safety itself, in that the word punitive that I used was not simply in reference to ISIS, but was in reference to the justice system itself and the way that we're treating people that are convicted of crimes, and the type of, to be honest, non-rehabilitation that they're getting right now within our prison system. Is that this punitive was the correct word for not just our foreign public safety, but our domestic public safety as well.
So, I absolutely agree in that sense that certainly our justice approach should be coercive, much more so than punitive, and that's something that I've advocated for during my tenure as a critic of justice. But, that being said, I believe we cannot separate our foreign policy approach with our domestic policy approach of keeping Canadians safe. And that means taking a stance that punishes the Islamic State. That means working with our allies, and this idea of guns blazing, I don't know where this comes from. We're talking about providing logistical assistance to the United States, to our partners, and taking down the Islamic State from above. We're talking about military advisors. We are talking about arming groups which are anti-Islamic State, which have done good work so far, strengthening our allies in the region. Can you explain to me, in that regard, how you don't believe that we should be taking these punitive actions against the Islamic State? What is the alternative to eradicating this, and I'll say it again, this death cult that perpetrates an ideology which transcends borders, which is infiltrating our internet, which is infiltrating social media, which is becoming a global issue? How do you assess this threat, if not in a punitive way?
Well, I believe the answer is actually within your question. It's the ideology. So far, what you're suggesting is that we go after the people. That's not going to solve anything. We need to go after the ideology that's behind this. And we don't do that with bullets and guns and bombs and military advisors.
Yeah, yes, sir, that is true. But surely the spread of this ideology, aside from the, obviously the CIA policy of blowback, etc., but surely containing this threat, containing the issue to the region, and ensuring, alongside education, infrastructure, etc., surely a major policy of this is military intervention. We simply put cannot hold negotiations with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. We simply cannot hold negotiations with leaders of the Islamic State. That would be ridiculous. You cannot, read to them Sesame Street or make them watch these things. The fact of the matter is that they're not going to be convinced. So how else do you convince someone to change their lifelong ideology if they are willing to inherently kill people and die alongside them in hopes of fulfilling that tainted and messed ideology?
Well, you're talking about a small number of people who are the leaders of this movement, the people who are at the core of this ideology, whereas I'm speaking of, the thousands of people who are living under what ISIS considers its own state. And I think that we forget a lot of that the everyday citizens who are suffering under Baghdadi. And instead of focusing on him, I would rather focus on trying to make things better for those citizens.
Well, with all due respect, I believe that the United Nations humanitarian assistance into ISIS-held regions has been rejected by Mr. Baghdadi, but we'll see about that. Looking at the facts of the case, however, the people that you're talking about in terms of providing assistance or aid, these people are being killed. These are, Muslims who are being killed by the Islamic State. And trust me, I'm sure if you ask them, would you want punitive actions taken against your captors, people who are holding you hostage effectively based on some coerced ideology that they have, brutally maligned from the idea of Islam? I guarantee if you ask them, they'd say they want punitive action. They'd say ramp up the coalition efforts against the Islamic State. I'm sure that they would say we want punitive action. So if you want to talk to them, go ahead. But why not take the initiative and ensure that, the captors are actually eliminated? So not only can we provide aid to those people held by the Islamic State, but we can liberate them as well.
These are some of the exact same arguments used when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And I believe strongly that if you go in, again, guns blazing as you're suggesting, all we're going to do is create a new ISIS that is much worse than the horrendous one we already have. This approach has been tried and tried and tried before and simply does not work.
Red Wolf.
Teddy, you keep saying guns ablazing, but I don't think that you have an idea of just how precise our military technology can be. I know that there have been times in the past where lots of different countries have gone to war and they've killed civilians inadvertently or advertently, and that does create what you say is a new ISIS, and that's definitely a concern. But military technology today has become extremely precise, and if we handle ourselves correctly, I believe that we can free these people who Stevie has rightly assessed to be basically hostages under this death cult, as he said, of ISIS. And I think he's right. They want to be free. And if we do this properly and we kill these people with the precision that our latest military technology allows, then we're not going to be creating a new ISIS. We're going to be creating a more stable Middle East.
Well, I'm certainly not going to say that every situation such as ISIS can most certainly be resolved just by, in the words of the Honorable Stevie, just by asking and reading Sesame Street. It's more of an issue of the focus that you did indeed speak of. And that's the kind of thing that I think we do, in fact, really need.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Okay, good. So open debate is over. We'll move on to the final topic, which includes two questions. The final topic is healthcare and or social. The order will go in Teddy, Red Wolf, Karumi, and Zhang. So the question is, while Canada's healthcare system may provide many individuals with many benefits, there is no doubt that in the end it has problems. Wait times, quality of patient care, efficiency, all of these things continue to plague the system. Prevention efforts have led the way in achieving core aspects of the national system and have led to partnership between the federal level and the provincial level.
I can't hear.
Oh wait.